For centuries, there's been an ancient practice, a technique so powerful and transformative that it was intentionally hidden. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. Imagine an ancient key, lost in time, that can open the most sacred portal, the memory of your soul. This technique won't teach you anything new, but it will lift the veil of what has been imposed on you. The biggest mistake wasn't making us ignorant, but making us believe we were something we aren't. What if you remembered your purpose today? What if, instead of looking outside yourself, you found a voice within you that has never left you? What if that voice could be activated through a technique accessible only to a few initiates, and protected so it doesn't become an instrument of control? This video isn't just a story. It's an invitation, a guide to a forbidden practice. Not because it's dark, but because it's so bright. The rulers of the world fear an awakened soul more than a sleeping army. In the next few minutes, we'll explore the hidden origins of this technique, its roots in forgotten wisdom schools, and why it has been banned, modified, or ridiculed by systems that favor the sleep of the soul, and how you can apply this technique in practice to remember who you truly are. Not an identity or a story, but a vibration, a living and eternal consciousness. We use analogies, symbols, and ancient philosophies to simplify the seemingly difficult and return to the essence. This isn't a theoretical course, but an inner experience when you allow your mind to listen with more than just your ears. This technique isn't for memorization, but for feeling, activating, and above all, remembering. If you're ready to look beyond appearances, question your own assertions, and turn to what your soul has never forgotten, this video could be the nudge you need. Forbidden doesn't always mean dangerous. Sometimes it's simply forbidden because the truth is too powerful. Almost all ancient cultures share a common denominator, a whisper that spans continents and centuries. The idea that we have forgotten who we truly are, that life as we live it today is a kind of dream, a veil separating us from our true identities, and that there are ways, practices, and techniques to awaken this sacred memory, but there's a problem or a mystery. These techniques aren't in history books, aren't taught in schools, and don't appear in official religions. They've been hidden, forbidden, or worse, turned into superstition, ridiculed, and blocked so no one can harness their true power. In ancient Egypt, the priests of the houses of life performed secret rituals in which the initiate suffered a kind of symbolic death. The body rested for hours while the consciousness was guided through subtle planes by a spiritual master. When they returned, they were no longer the same. They had passed through the veil and remembered. In ancient Greece, the Orphic school spoke of the soul being trapped in the body, but not in a sad way. It was more of a purification process. They taught chants, breathing exercises, and trance states that temporarily freed the soul from its earthly identity to contemplate its divine origin. This experience, they said, could not be reversed. In ancient India, the Rikshas, the seers of truth, taught the concept of Smarana, the act of remembering what the soul already knows. For them, spiritual ignorance was not a lack of information, but a separation. The path back was not through the accumulation of knowledge, but through unlearning, the practice of detachment, stillness, and vibrational alignment, allowing consciousness to return to its original state. In all these cases, the technique was essentially the same, albeit in different forms. It wasn't about learning something from the outside, but rather about aligning oneself with the spiritual memory that lives within oneself. Then came darkness, religious wars, the institutionalization of spirituality. The external dominated the internal. What was once a path to remembrance has become empty ritual, dogma, or heresy. Techniques are fragmented, symbols are hidden in myth, and the essence is labeled dangerous. Dangerous to whom? To the systems that don't want us to remember. For when the soul remembers who it is, it can no longer be controlled. Today, this knowledge returns, not as something new, but as a memory that awakens in those who are ready to see. And the most incredible thing is that this forbidden technique has always been within you, hidden deep within your consciousness. It's just waiting for you to discover it. To understand the power of this technique, which is considered forbidden, secret, or forgotten, we must first understand an idea that defies common thought. The soul doesn't need to learn who it is. It only needs to remember. And this remembering doesn't come from thinking, but from a vibration, a specific frequency that, when activated within you, makes everything false disappear and allows the true to appear as a silent light. But how does one access this frequency? The forbidden technique isn't a string of words or an external ritual, but an inner activation, a sequence of steps that harmonize body, mind, energy, and consciousness until, through resonance, the soul's memory manifests, not as a concept but as a living experience. Imagine your soul is like a perfect melody, but overlaid with noise, interference, strange beliefs, trauma, and conditioning. This technique works like a tuner. It doesn't add anything, but simply removes distractions, polishes, and harmonizes so that the melody becomes audible again. This technique consists of 3 phases that follow no fixed order, but are essential. First comes the deprogramming of the false self. This is the first and most difficult phase. It involves identifying the inner voices that aren't yours, ideas you've accepted without question, masks you wear without realizing it. Here, you observe with deep attention what you think, what you desire, what you fear, and ask yourself, is this mine or was it imposed on me? The technique teaches you to empty yourself and dismantle old thoughts. Not through struggle, but with clarity, because what was built without your soul can be dismantled by it once you become aware of it. Then comes the activation of the inner sense. When the noise subsides, something emerges that has always been there, but we barely noticed. This sense is a direct perception, without logic or emotion. It awakens not through effort, but through attunement. The technique awakens this sense through conscious breathing, ritual silence, attention to the body, and the visualization of symbols. An important principle is, what you imagine with devotion, your soul recognizes as real. Imagination here is not fantasy, but a bridge. The symbols used, such as the inner fire, the lotus of the heart, or the mirror of the soul, were not invented. They are universal images that activate old memories. Used correctly, they do not generate ideas, but rather awaken inner visions, experiences, and reconnections. Finally, there is resonance with the true name. Deep traditions speak of the hidden name of the soul, which is not a sound but a unique vibration. The technique teaches that every being possesses a sacred frequency that, when properly addressed, not with words, but with a state of being, evokes immediate recognition. It's as if a door that's been closed for centuries opens. People remember not with their minds, but with vibrations. An inexplicable certainty arises. It's me. I've always been this way, I just forgot it. This process doesn't happen overnight. It requires dedication, perseverance, and a lot of honesty. But once you begin, something irreversible happens. A part of you begins to observe from a deeper, calmer, and more truthful perspective. And then the real journey begins. As the technique begins to work, the false self weakens and the inner vibration becomes clearer. Something happens that cannot be explained in ordinary words. The soul begins to remember without thinking. It's as if a light turns on in a space that's always been there, but you've forgotten to explore. What appears aren't ideas, but presences. Parts of you waiting to be seen. The part of you that loves unconditionally, that trusts without fear, that knows without having to learn. In this phase, awakening ceases to be abstract and becomes real. The soul recognizes its origin, but be careful, not everything that emerges is light. When someone remembers who they are, they also remember who they were not. Mistakes, unresolved decisions, and unhealed wounds surface. This is part of the process, not to punish, but to liberate, for it is not possible to embrace the whole soul without also accepting its shadow. When used correctly, the technique not only reveals its light, but also allows you to see things you've hidden from yourself. For this reason, many traditions considered this practice dangerous for those unprepared for it, because soul-searching requires spiritual maturity, measured not in years, but in the will to recognize the truth. At this point, those who practice it intensively usually enter a state of conscious trance. It's not a trance in the sense of modern psychology, loss of self, or hypnosis, but rather an expansion of perspective. The soul takes control of perception. One feels the body, but also perceives the surroundings from a certain distance. You think, but thinking is no longer the focus. It's as if your consciousness takes a step back from the ego, and from this silent place, everything begins to take on new meaning. Emotions become clearer, perception expands, time loses its shape, intuitions emerge without logical explanation, memories of past lives, memories of ancestors, and knowledge you've never studied, but which seems to have always been with you. This is the deepest level of the technique, a place where it's no longer about practice but about actual living. You begin to act from a new, truer center. She no longer acts through a mask, but through her true self. Decisions become clearer, relationships more honest, and fears diminish. And here something strange happens. The soul doesn't learn who it is. It remembers. This memory isn't an image or a story, but a frequency, a constant vibration that recognizes itself as home. In this moment, something sacred happens. The soul is anchored. When that happens, nothing will be the same again. Your body will remain here, life will go on, but something inside you will awaken and never sleep again. Then you'll understand why this technique was forbidden. Not because it's dangerous for you, but because it threatens everything that keeps you asleep. Awakening isn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process. And remembering who you are, even if it's just for a moment of inner revelation, doesn't mean you'll automatically live in that state. The technique we speak of is not just a spiritual experience. It is a compass for everyday life. Its daily application transforms the seeker into a sage, the apprentice into a master, and routine into a ritual. We are not talking about rigid rules here, but rather living principles, paths that, when pursued with intention and perseverance, activate and preserve memory even amidst the hustle and bustle of life. True spiritual power lies not in attaining enlightenment in a cave, but in staying awake amidst the noise of the world. First, cultivate active stillness. The soul remembers best in silence, not just in silence without noise, but in the silence of mindfulness. Dedicate a few minutes every day, no matter how many, but make it a sacred time to be with yourself, without seeking anything, without expecting visions, simply breathing, observing, allowing. This space is not a place of rest, but a sanctuary. There, the echo of your true name begins to resonate. Second, transform your actions into ceremonies. One of the keys to the technique is to make the action an act of presence. Eating, walking, speaking, looking, everything can become an exercise in remembering if it occurs from the core of your being. Every gesture can be a sacrifice, every word an invocation. Ask yourself, am I acting from my false self or from my soul? When you live from the soul, the small things become sacred, and this maintains the frequency of remembrance. Third, be mindful of what you feed your mind. Your soul doesn't forget, but your mind can bury that memory amidst all the distractions. What do you consume daily? What conversations do you accept? What images do you repeat? The technique teaches that everything that enters your senses creates a vibrational field, which is the temple in which the soul's memory appears. Purify your environment and focus your attention, like an alchemist with fire. Fourth, speak less and more deeply. Don't repeat what you've read, don't use other people's phrases, and don't speak out of habit. When you speak, let your voice come from the place where your soul resides. Words from memory have the power to awaken other souls. Make your voice a conduit of resonance, not just ideas. Fifth, act as if you already know who you are. Even if you don't fully remember yet, act as if you do, not to act, but to tune in. The soul reveals itself not in constant doubt, but when it sees that you want to live true to your essence, even before you understand everything. Walk as if you carry an ancient heritage within you. Love as if you have loved for centuries, and the memory will come, not through searching, but through vibration. For centuries, we have been told that awakening is difficult, the soul an incomprehensible mystery, and knowing who we truly are is a privilege of only a few. But it isn't so. The most forbidden truth isn't the most difficult. It's the simplest, the clearest, the most obvious, and also the most feared by those who want to put you to sleep. This journey we began together wasn't just a bunch of ideas. It was a map, a sign, a light for you to sense that there is more, something beyond the name you say every day, the role you play in your life, the story you've been told about yourself. You aren't that, you never were. You are a living piece of eternal consciousness, a note in a cosmic symphony that's still playing. You are an ancient memory clothed in the present, and you've forgotten that we all have, but here's the key. You can remember. The technique we're talking about isn't a new invention, nor is it a secret formula for sale. It's a reflection of what has always been within you. It's the reactivation of your original memory. And most importantly, you don't have to look outside, you don't need gurus, and you don't have to be perfect. You just have to return to your center, silence the noise, and let your soul, with its infinite wisdom, show you what it has always known. Remember who you are. This not only changes your way of thinking, but also your view of the world. You no longer see enemies, you see mirrors, you no longer fear the future, you respect it, you no longer repeat broken stories. You begin to write the truth. When this truth becomes reality, everything truly changes. You no longer depend on the approval of others because you are aligned with something greater. You don't have to have all the answers because your silence has become wise. You no longer chase after love because you understand that you are love. This is not an empty promise. It is an invitation that you must accept with courage, because the path of the soul that remembers is beautiful, but not easy. It takes away everything that is not you, transforms you, and presents you to the world. Face what you are not so that you can choose who you really are. If this message has touched you, if something inside you has been shaken, if a part of you has said, yes, this is for me, do not let your mind extinguish that flame. Subscribe to the channel. If this video touched your heart, give it a like, share it with those who also need to remember, because there is no greater revolution than an awakened soul. If you do, others will follow, and so the world, without violence, without rigid rules, without imposed religions, will begin to change from within, from where it all began, from memory. You are not here to learn, you are here to remember, and that remembering has already begun.